Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Roger Gilbert reporting for International Aquafeed magazine, and I'm here in Australia. I'm at the WAS, the World Aquaculture Society's meeting here in Asia Pacific in Darwin. And we've been in Darwin for a little time now, and this is the last day of the show. Beautiful event and weather, of course. And I'm fortunate to be in the company of Dr Guillaume Drillet. And he is going to talk to us, or first of all, he is from the SGS Testing and Control Services based out of Singapore. It's a global marine services group, and he's the Asia Pacific marine services specialist. And what was interesting at the conference that is alongside the exhibition centre here was a session on microplastics and microplastics in food. And I'm going to ask what built up to the conference focusing on this subject, and what was the findings that led to the presentations that we heard. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Gilbert.
Thank you, Roger. So yes, it was a very nice conference, you're right, and the weather is very exceptional actually. Coming from Singapore, I'm very happy to have a bit of dry weather. I came here to make a presentation on microplastic. As you know, we have big issues with plastic globally. We are preparing a new international treaty on plastic waste management, and decreasing the pollution from plastics is very important. We find it everywhere, including in the food, in the feed. In the aquaculture industry, we are using plastic necessarily in our farms, but we are also potentially impacted by plastic. And I think potentially impacted by plastic by the vision of the consumers about the final product that we have. And so we need to be able to measure. Otherwise, the public may be scared it may not be a real issue. So far, so good. I will say the toxicological information that we have and all the food safety, risk management, risk assessment that has been in place show that the risk is low. And so there's no, let's say, risk that we find today that should be a problem for the consumers. Doesn't mean that there is not potentially any risk, but we find microplastic in absolutely everything, drinking bottles and so on, so not only on seafood. Ourselves, we have developed a method and transfer methods from the university into our laboratory, so we work commercially with all the quality control and quality assurance system. And the data I was presenting was actually about the quantity of microplastic we find in farms. So we tested the plastic concentration in the sediment, in mussels, in the water bodies around farms, as well as within recirculated farms. And the preliminary results are interesting, that all these methods that have been developed by the best institute in the world are transferable already in commercial setup. So for us, it's very important. We have 2,500 laboratories around the world, so we need to be able to make sure that all of them use the same method, so data are comparable. And we find out, for example, that in recirculated farms, even though we have a lot of plastic and paint, biomedia, and so on, we don't have too much microplastic particle that we can detect, and we have more in the water. In mussels, it's interesting because we find some microplastic, but a lot of them, they are kind of used as a filter somehow, and the plastic particles are actually captured on the bottom of the oceans, which are basically similar finding as some of the research organizations in other places are finding. So.
And how many presentations were there, just out of interest?
So no, we had one presentation on plastic, and there was a full session of environmental issues. Okay. But a lot of it, for example, was about modeling. So you could transfer this particle modeling and agent-based modeling for microplastic as well as other things. Yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit about how we got here? Because I think it just hasn't come out of the blue. I think maybe there's been a concern or an issue that's led to WAS addressing the subject.
Yes, so we have been studying microplastic for 1 or 2 decades now. There is a peak, I would say, of interest from the academia. And we are producing, I think, 15,000 papers a year on microplastic issues. In aquaculture, a bit less. And so a few years ago, we started doing some workshop on plastic from shipping, one thing, and then we did plastic in aquaculture, because we always mix aquaculture and fisheries, and those are in reality two different industries when it comes to management of plastic. And then we had in 2020 at the World Aquaculture Society, we had to, you'll remember, because of COVID, move the meeting from Singapore 2 years later, but we still managed to make an online event where we discuss about microplastic together with people representing GESAMP and so those international working group. So things are developing, and I think in our industry we should not be afraid of actually monitoring. We should be monitoring how much we have, so that if one day there is, I would say, a health concern, then we are capable of acting quickly.
Yes.
And we are not the last one running after the information.
Yeah. And what's the next step? Are you just continuing to test and monitor?
Yes, so we continue to test and monitor for all kind of different clients. And I think we are also supporting standardization of methods. So we're in discussion with a lot of international organizations for that. For us already internally in SGS, we have transferred the method across, so our results are comparable, and I think that's very important. It's also important from our client perspective, that when they get the data produced from one of our labs, they will have the same results from another lab, right? Because there is a huge variability in the studies that have been done.
But just to put it finally in perspective, the seafood industry, whether it's fisheries or aquaculture, is no better or worse than what we expect to find in other foods.
So we are finding microplastic in absolutely everything, drinking waters as well, the plastic bottles in particular necessarily. So I think it's very important that we do monitor what there is in every single environment, and also we monitor what could be the potential impact, for example, of processing the food, cooking the food. How will that change the release of potential chemicals and so on? So there's still a lot basically to do. As I say, we know we may have a problem, but we need to define exactly to which extent, so we can take the right measures basically to counteract that.
Well, finally, Dr. Drillet, how did you find the event in Darwin here this year?
I am very happy about the Darwin event. So it's smaller than what we had in Singapore a few months ago. But I think we have a very nice quality of speakers, and we have a trade show with very nice technologies. And I'm very happy to see it's a bit of a different crowd from what we have seen in Southeast Asia before, but very, very interesting people. So for me, it was really a fantastic event.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.